Orochi, a samurai ghost story, creepypasta. In a deep black night on a lonely plain, with vast oceans of dried weeds and bushes extending in all directions, a lonely little gray figure shaped its way out of the darkness, its tiny silhouette slowly taking on form against the thick, black veil of night. That figure was me. My name is Orochi. I'm a master-less samurai. My clan was wiped out by another not too long ago. I should have died with them, but I was a coward. As my daimyo, my lord, Takaga Hideyoshi, laid there dying, covered in blood, he held my hand as he spoke his last words. Orochi, **. When I was young, my family resided in a small village named Kyanshi. There lived a beautiful girl named Haruki. I was of noble descent and she was a poor farmer's daughter, but even though it was forbidden, we were madly in love. My family moved away and I was married to the daughter of a mighty warlord **. I've lived an honorable and successful life, but all this time, my heart secretly still belonged to beautiful Haruki. She was my first and only true love. I want you to cremate me, bring my ashes to Kyanshi **, and give them to Haruki if she's still alive. If not, I want you to bury me next to her, so our spirits can meet in the nether realm. Please, *bloody cough. When you have completed your task, I want you to commit harakiri like an honorable samurai. He closed his eyes and died. I really wanted to fulfill his second last wish because I had big doubts if I was able to fulfill his last. I burned the old man with the proper rites, filled his honorable ashes into a small pot that used to contain wine, and set out to complete my mission. Little did I know that Kyanshi was at the other end of the country. I had to cross countless valleys, mountains, and rivers to get there. After an eternity, I finally reached the remote region where Kyanshi was located. The weather was hot and dry. The night caught up with me faster than expected. So here I was, trying to keep on the narrow path and not to get lost in the darkness, with cicadas chirping all around me. After a while, finally, some lights appeared in the distance. A small haggard figure cross-read my path. It was an old peasant woman. "Excuse me, is this Kyanshi?" I asked, pointing towards the lights. The woman stopped and very slowly raised her head. Her face was the most wrinkly surface that I have ever seen. Her mouth widened into a big toothless smile. She started laughing. It sounded like an old creaky mill that had to move for the first time in years. "Miss." Her raspy laugh grew louder and louder. I didn't understand what was so funny, so I just went on. I tried to shrug it off as an old crazy woman that has been working in the sun for too long, but I could still hear her laughter in the distance, echoing over the valley and in my mind. As I approached the lights, I saw a sign, reading, "Kyanshi." Finally, I crossed a small red bridge and recognized a few rundown houses between the trees and bushes. The light was coming from one house in particular, along with sounds of brute yelling and shouting that would turn out as the luring song of drunk people. I entered the small tavern. What I saw was a bunch of loud, drunk, dirty farmers, chanting old songs, dancing and making merry, spilling their sake, falling over and laughing heartily. This joyful, primitive scene put a smile on my face. "Excuse me," I yelled. The room fell into a sudden silence. The guests all turned around to look at me. "Tell me, young man." A small old farmer approached me, wearing nothing but a loincloth. His leathery face was of a bronzed color. "Tell me a joke." All eyes were fixed on me and they looked dead serious. I just stood there confused. "Think of something." With a shaky voice I asked, "Why did the wife hit the husband with a chair?" Dead silence. A drop of sweat formed on my brow. "Because the table was too heavy," I concluded. A moment of unbearable awkwardness passed. Suddenly the people, everybody, all at once started laughing so loud the little tavern was shaking. The old man flung his arm around my waist, being as small as he was, and pulled me towards the bar. "Here, youngin, your drink is on me." "Oh, thank you. My name is—" "Shut up and drink this." The strong sake burned its way down my throat, into my stomach, and sent its warmth directly to my head. The fat pig-faced bartender grinned and poured another one, spilling half of it, for which the fat pig-faced woman next to him, probably his wife, slapped him. He didn't even notice it. At the table next to us were some farmers playing dice, and in the corner, there sat the old woman I met on my way here. Her eyes were closed, and she quietly chuckled to herself. How did she get here so fast? You know, youngin, here we don't care much about the rest of the world. Shogun, samurai, war, peace, all unimportant here. Mizuki, do your dance, he ordered. A young man at a table stood up, almost fell over, caught himself again and spurted. Of course, anything for you, my cherry blossom. He put his head on the sake-stained table, placed his hands on either side and lifted his whole small body into the air, performing a wobbly headstand. The crowd applauded and cheered. He then proceeded to kick into the air, one scrawny leg at a time, singing, "Oh dear Buddha, won't you take my sorrow? Oh dear Buddha, won't you take my pain? Oh dear Buddha, won't you take my sorrow?" Wait, what is that you say? Give up on drink and everything? I'd rather be born again. The crowd went wild and poor Mizuki fell in such a way that the whole table flipped over and buried him under itself, breaking cups, jugs, and the barkeeper's heart. The laughter reached its peak. I was being served drink after drink, and the warmth took a hold of me. Such a nice place this was, far away from the complexities of politics, protocol, and power struggles. Just a bunch of simple people enjoying the night, living life to the fullest. Suddenly, a loud clap of thunder struck, sending its echo through the valley. Instant silence befell the bar. I looked around. Everybody turned pale. Nobody smiled anymore. What's wrong? I asked. SHH. The old man firmly shut me up. Not a word was spoken. The once merry atmosphere had turned into one of dead serious tension. Everybody was looking towards the door, listening for something. I didn't know what everybody was so afraid of, but for sure I was getting nervous as well. All of a sudden, the sound of rain violently swooshed over our heads, covering everything, rustling over the roof, accompanied by claps of roaring thunder. After a few moments, another sound distinguished itself from the noise of the rainstorm. It was the sound of slow, heavy footsteps hitting the wooden floorboards in front of the tavern. Getting closer. They stopped just in front of the door. A drop of sweat ran down the bartender's face. 3 heavy knocks. I spoke. Aren't you gonna let him in? It's raining really heavily. The old man grabbed my kimono, pulling my face close to his, and hissed angrily. Shut the hell up, stranger. You have no idea what's outside. His eyes burned with rage and fear. Cold sweat covered his face, so I shut up. Another 3 knocks. Please just go away, the fat woman whispered to herself. Just one more time and it will leave, the old man whispered. A knock was heard, then another, but before the third one, a soft female voice called out in the distance. Kaoru. The old man's face turned white in pure terror. That's... Mizuki stammered. Kaoru, where are you? The voice called out. She's calling for that damn dog. Go inside, god damn it. Go inside, the old man whispered. Kaoru. The heavy steps started again, this time leading away from the door, leaving the wooden floorboards and continuing in the mud towards to where the woman was heard. The old man jumped up, grabbed his pitchfork and walked towards the door decisively. But all of a sudden, fear struck him like a hammer and he stopped in his tracks. As he stood there trembling, not knowing what to do, Mizuki, with a dice still sticking to his red face from his fall, put his hand on the old man's shoulder. Don't go out there. He'll kill you. But she's my daughter, the old man replied with a shaky voice. A desperate scream. I downed my sake in one gulp, grabbed my katana, walked past the trembling farmers, and stepped outside. It was pitch black and the rain made it hard to see. However, another scream showed me the right direction. I was able to make out 2 struggling figures. As I approached them, I saw the beautiful young woman, dressed in white, pleading for help. The fiend was holding her by the wrist, pulling her towards him. He wore an old, dark, rusty yoroi, a samurai's armor, and he was holding a wakizashi, a samurai's small side sword, in his hand, threatening her, ready to strike. Hey you! I yelled at him. He stopped and turned towards me. As I got closer, I noticed something kind of odd about him. This man did in fact not have a head on his shoulders. Was it a trick of the eyes? No, he was actually really missing his head. He let go of the woman, drew his sword and walked towards me with huge angry steps. Even though there was no facial expression from which I could read his motives, his body language betrayed a strong desire to end me. I was so staggered, and I have to admit also scared, that I completely forgot to draw my sword right up until the moment he swung for me. I blocked in the very last second. His strike was so strong it threw me down into the mud. No bow, no introduction, nothing. How rude. Crawling backwards, I quickly got up only to face a series of mighty blows. The ones I wasn't able to block, I evaded by hairbreadth. If I hadn't, they would have surely killed me instantly. He was constantly walking, his strikes forcing me to back up. It was still raining, and with every step I had trouble not to fall on the slippery ground. My heart was beating like crazy and cold sweat started forming on my brow. Still I tried to remain calm, as my master had taught me. My enemy was a skilled swordsman and a strong one, yes, but he was much too aggressive. He had no defense at all. Keep calm. Parry. Breathe. Listen to the rain until you see an opening and strike. With all my strength, I thrust my sword right through him. Instead of pulling it out, I sliced through his body until my sword came out of his flank, tearing his stomach open, me ending up in an elegant pose, down on one knee, my katana raised up high in the air. I was waiting for him to fall, but he didn't. He just stood there. Then I saw it. Where I had cut him open, his flesh was gray and rotting, and there was no blood pouring out from his wound, but maggots. Hundreds of tiny white maggots fell out of him onto the wet ground, moving and squirming. I struggled not to throw up. I looked up at him and saw that he had no intention of falling whatsoever. He just stood there as firmly as before, gripping his sword even tighter. I had only made him angrier. Then it dawned on me. Of course he didn't fall. When missing a head wouldn't stop him, why would my sword? The man was a walking corpse. As I realized this, a cold shiver ran down my spine. How do you kill someone who's already dead? He again started swinging his sword. I tried my best to dodge him, but his strikes came closer and closer. I was really scared now. Everything I did just seemed to delay the inevitable. In panic, I tried to think of something to escape this horrible situation, but nothing came to mind. The undead samurai forced me further back until I had to step onto the small red bridge that led out of the village. With his strikes, he pushed me with my back up against the railing, where I could hear the loud rushing of the small river that had become a violent torrent due to the rain. With one monstrous blow, he struck the sword out of my wet hands. Unarmed, with nowhere to go, I knew this was my end. He raised his sword one last time. I closed my eyes, when suddenly I heard a bark. The samurai stopped his movement as a small white dog sunk his teeth deep into his lower leg. This must be Kaoru, standing on one leg and trying to shake the animal off his other. The samurai struggled to keep his balance. I gathered all my strength and courage and pushed the fiend over the ledge. He fell off the bridge and into the river, which immediately carried him away. He threw his arms around trying to keep above the water, but his heavy armor dragged him down. Within a moment he was gone. I don't know if he drowned, but at least he was gone. I sank down on my knees, letting out a sigh of relief. Kaoru jumped me and started licking my face as I held him in my arms. May the gods bless this brave little creature. Kaoru, I heard a voice call out. It was the young woman in white. I got up as she ran towards me. She flung her arms around me, and before I could think, she planted a big kiss on my lips. I blushed. Thank you. Thank you so much. If it weren't for you, I'd surely be. Don't mention it. That is a samurai's job, I said heroically. She looked me deeply in the eyes and smiled. The rain pouring down on us made her even more beautiful. Suddenly she looked at something behind me. I turned my head and, to my demise, I saw at least 24 men standing there, wearing tattered, rusty armor, all holding swords. Their faces were gray, full of scars, black spots, and without expression. Their skin rotting and falling of their bones, maggots and other vermin were eating away at their putrid flesh. Their eyes were completely white. Some of them had large wounds, exposing their black rotting inner organs. Others were missing limbs or worse. An army of dead men stood there ready to claim our lives. Another 3 knocks. "I think we should go inside," the girl said. "I agree." I picked up my sword and we hurried back to the little tavern, where the farmers were already beckoning us to come in quickly. The door was shut and cheers and cries of joy filled the air. The old man threw his arms around his daughter, crying and scolding her for going out during a storm. The farmers encircled me, patting me on the shoulder, admiring my courage, and also Keiru got his share of praise. Not a minute later, everyone went back to drinking, singing, and making merry. "Aren't worried about the dead men outside?" I asked. "Not to worry," replied the old man. "They can't come here. The little statue of Buddha above the door is guarding this place," he said while pointing to a small statue of Buddha that was made from black stone and stood on his head. Odd. What were those creatures anyway? "Oh, they're just a bunch of restless samurai ghosts trying to ruin our evening." The old man handed me another cup of sake. "Seems a little more serious than that," I stated. "I mean, what sort of place is this, where the dead are terrorizing the living?" "Well, at least the sake is good." The man didn't answer. He just smiled, looking at the barkeeper who looked back at him with the same wicked smile. I took another sip from my cup. Tasted different from before. As the taste unfolded, my face tightened. I looked into my cup. The sake was black. No, it was dark red. I spat out a gush of red fluid across the counter. Blood. It was blood. What the hell? Everybody started laughing. What a sick joke. To replace my sake with blue. As I scanned the room to find the culprit, I realized that all the cups were filled with blood. Everybody was laughing, gushes of blood flowing from their mouths. I couldn't believe my eyes. What the hell was going on here? Little did I know that what I saw then would only be a taste of the horrors I was about to witness. In shock, I turned towards the old man. His skin had turned black. His wrinkles had deepened and multiplied. Out of his mouth grew long, pointy teeth. His grin spread from ear to ear and his eyes were but little black knobs. I turned my head and saw Mizuki, who looked at me with a blank expression. Then suddenly, his tongue shot out from his mouth, extending across the bar, like a frog's, grabbing my katana and carrying it back to his mouth. With my sword clenched in his teeth, he smiled at me. I turned to the barkeeper, hoping for something. I don't know what, maybe an expression that was as terrified as mine. But behold, the fat bartender wasn't human anymore. He was a big fat pig. A pig that was standing upright, laughing and grunting, wearing human clothes, blood flowing from his snout and onto his apron. His eyes rolled around in their sockets as he lost all semblance of a human being. His wife, or whatever it was, started bloating up, getting round, her skin stretching far beyond all possibility. I turned around to see the whole tavern transform and deform in the most gruesome and disgusting of ways. All the while inhumane laughter filled the rotten air. In panic, I jumped up. I stumbled through the room, trying to find the exit, but everywhere I looked I saw things more horrible than I could imagine. One guest grew additional eyes, one after the other until his face was just a conglomerate of eyes, all looking in a different direction. One farmer's head split open to reveal the bone underneath. He grabbed his loose skin and took it off just as one would get undressed. He was standing there, a naked skeleton, showing me his bloody skin and laughing. Another man's body stretched until he was but a giant snake with a human-like face. The old leather-faced man next to me spread his arms. No, they were wings. His fingers had grown long and thin, and between them there were webbings of black skin. He spread them and took off fluttering around the bar, like a bat. He was laughing in a high-pitched voice and said, "Ha ha ha, my boy, you don't need to worry about the damned souls outside. Not when there are so many damned souls in here. Ha 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 ha." The bartender's wife grew bigger and bigger until it exploded. Her body was ripped to bloody pieces and her inner organs, her heart, her lungs, her liver, her intestines flew around the room. Her stomach grew big red eyes and a huge mouth filled with sharp teeth. It was crying and whining. Hungry, hungry. The old woman in the corner grew additional limbs, too many to count, and a thick black fur. She crawled up the wall and onto the ceiling like a huge spider. Her mouth gaped open wide, and out of it came a cloud of all sorts of bugs. Spiders, moths, centipedes, and brightly colored butterflies. They relentlessly shot out of her, filling the small room, swarming the air. I fell silent. My heart was pounding as I gazed at this most grotesque of spectacles. Amazed and horrified, I just sat there, watching these creatures showing off their monstrous bodies, performing their hellish stunts, knowing that no mortal has ever survived to speak of such things. I looked down and I saw Kaoru. At least this little creature was still. No, the little white dog had 3 heads now. They were all growling and grinding their teeth menacingly. Next to him stood the girl. She was still in human form. Her white kimono made her look like a glowing angel amongst the demons of hell. She smiled a sweet and innocent smile. I tried to reach her, but then her eyes turned white and her hair extended and spread out, forming huge tentacles, lifting her off the ground, making it look like she was hovering. Strains of her hair grabbed both of my wrists and ankles and dragged me towards her. I couldn't move. "Well, young samurai, you really are a brave one." Her voice sounded like an otherworldly echo. "I like the brave ones. Their souls taste the best." Her jaw unhinged like a snake's and her mouth spread open so wide it almost touched the ground, revealing rows and rows of razor-sharp teeth. There, it will be over soon," she said in a nasty tone. She didn't really speak, but I could still hear her voice in my head. I squirmed and wriggled, trying to free myself. This had to be a dream. Was I to die like this? Devoured by a demon? All the horrible creatures laughed as she pulled me towards her gaping mouth. In my utter desperation, I managed to pull out the wine bottle in which I carried my honorable daimyo's ashes, and I threw it in her face. The bottle burst and a thick cloud of white ashes filled the room. I fell to the ground and blindly crawled back into a corner. The white dust settled and I saw the girl. She was back to normal, kneeling on the floor in the middle of the room, covered in ashes. In a daze, she stared into the ashen air, tears forming in her eyes. "Hide! Hideyoshi, is it really you?" she cried. "Oh my God! Hide! I've missed you so much. You're finally back. Oh, where were you all this time? My Hide! My one and only love." All the terrible creatures around us moved back away from her, and a heavenly, forgiving glow was cast on her from above. "Hide! Oh, I love you. I love you so much," she cried. Her weeping was so desperate, so heartbreaking. The monsters' faces gained back some semblance of human emotion, and tears were flowing from their many eyes. "Please, take me away from here, like you promised when you left. We can finally be together. Oh, I love you, Hide." A bright white light started glowing from within her, getting stronger, permeating all around us, filling the room until I couldn't see anymore. I fell unconscious. I woke up in a field. It took me some time to realize where I was. The sun was up, burning down on me. With wobbly legs, I got up. I realized that I had been laying in an overgrown ruin. Wooden planks stuck out here and there in between the reeds and bushes, indicating that this was once a small tavern. As I looked around confusedly, I realized that there were old and weathered remnants of small houses all around. This was once a village. I walked around a bit, then I crossed a little creaky bridge that used to be red and that ran over a now dry river. At the end, on the ground, there laid a sign, almost unreadable. It said, "Kaianshi." It wasn't until a few days later in another small village, where an old fortune teller told me what had happened. Many years ago, when the rich samurai clan that was my daimyo's moved away from Kaianshi, a war broke out. A band of war-ridden, hungry samurai raided the village during a thunderstorm, taking what they wanted, burning down the entire village and killing every single villager, every man, woman, and child. As life goes, shortly after, they were ambushed by another clan and hacked to pieces. Rumor has it that all of them, the villagers and the samurai, still haunt the place where Kaianshi once stood, their souls forever trapped between this world and the next. All of them but one, I thought. I did not commit harakiri. I ventured on to become a great samurai. I formed my own clan, and whenever I could, I favored peace over war. I lived, fought, and loved. I had become a courageous, honorable nobleman. But to this day, I shall never forget the horrors I had seen that night. I don't blame you if you don't believe me. I still have trouble believing it myself. My name is Irochi and this is my story.